Good afternoon. Yeah, back then, and then we moved to another campus, and there was no playground. It was just like this field, and we used to have a blast. There would, like after it rained, there would be all these, little streams of water, and we'd make improvised boats with sticks and have boat races and all kinds of stuff. So it was simple, but it was a great time. Now, what time is it now exactly? So I can, oh, there's the clock. Okay, we have 1 hour. Okay, great. Now today, because usually we've started with much younger children, so and we would do a different kind of programming. But today we're going to just start with the heavy hitting. In the course of your life, you will encounter these two characters. Now, before we go into the characters that I want to discuss, I'm sure all of you have noticed, like everybody else in the world, that there's a lot of fighting going on. And there's a lot of tension all over the world. And I noticed that you have this virtues chart, and of course the last word there is unity. Okay, so I'm an old man, but I continue to be baffled by the fact that human beings, and our beloved planet that we human beings are destroying in a way, which is at least, it's over 4 billion years old, and if the entire history of our planet was a kilometer, our presence on this planet is like a centimeter. In the Museum of Natural History in New York, it's a mile, it's like an inch. So you get the idea. Here we've been so little time, and yet the violence and the destruction that our fellow human beings have done. Now, I think that having said this, most people all understand these sort of virtues, that we want unity, we want peace, and that we're all actually members of the same human race. If you want to be scientific, we actually all evolved out of Africa. So we even have a common, homeland, as it were, that by geological timing, that from a human point of view, it seems like a long time, but from the relative geological point of view, it's happened like that. Okay, so I think that this element of recognition, that we recognize each other as human beings. In a war or any kind of military training, the first thing that you need to do is to somehow turn the enemy into a non-human being, okay? Because human beings aren't made for what wars and that kind of thing requires. That's why after a war, there's so much trauma and among the people who return, which I think is a good thing, because that just gives hope that human beings aren't really built for that. So recognition, and if we could just recognize each other's humanity. To me, it would seem like, during the Spanish Civil War, they were fighting, and then it was Christmas Day, so the two sides decided, let's stop this fighting. For one day, for Christmas Day, they stopped fighting, and they had a great meal together and hung out together, and then they said goodnight, and then the next day they started fighting again. How crazy is that? Okay, now, I want to discuss that there are moments that we all have, where we're with friends, or we are sharing an experience with nature, and we think, oh, if only we could all of humanity could be recognizing and sharing these things together. And then there's also, in the human history, great art that when one is experiencing the art, that you realize, wow, that human beings are capable of this, and that it somehow speaks to the part in all of us that knows that we're not enemies of each other, that knows that we could interact and share and discuss instead of just resorting all the time to fighting and violence and non-recognition that these issues can be resolved and that people can live happy lives. Now, one composer that you guys will encounter in your life, who, when I travel around the world, doesn't matter whether it's Europe, South America, Japan, that an inordinate number of people, when they talk about the composer, that somehow gives them that sense of inner peace. It's Johann Sebastian Bach. Now, this was a guy who lived 1685 to 1750. He was very unusual in a lot of ways. That number one, he had artists tend to have tumultuous personal lives. He had two great marriages. The first wife died when Bach was in his early 30s, and then he had another marriage. And between the two wives, they had, meaning the two wives, 20 children. And he was a great educator, and the whole next generation of top-level musicians were students of Bach. So this combination of this super genius, along with a guy who really cared for his teaching, was very unusual. Now, in his music, that there are certain qualities that, without a question, that composers who want to have a completely different style than him, but they study his music. By far the most studied composer since his death. Doesn't matter if it's 20th century composer like Copland or 19th century composer, Russian composer, they've all studied Bach. And I just want to point out, so that when you listen to Bach, what are the salient qualities that give him that distinction? So, in music, in music, we have fundamental, harmonies. And there's a lot of songs, right, that what is this song? You didn't recognize it? The big chords that are moving through a piece. Okay. But then we have the different elements. And you see, like with this in the Happy Birthday, this is the tune, right? And all the other notes are just subservient to that melody. Okay. Now, in this, in Bach, that, yes, fantastic harmonies. And you can do make a kind of a like a Spanish tango out of it, so that the harmonies themselves are available to head in any direction. But here's the salient character. Bach believed that each element in his music should be an independent and complete voice, a complete human expression. And so we have here, instead of like here, or even a very beautiful piece, but where this is the bottom line, and then you have not bad, but it's all going to depend to be a beautiful piece on this tune. Without that top, this is not quite music yet. But with Bach, I'll show you what's on the bottom line. That line, which is going to be playing at the beginning of this prelude, a supporting role, is already a complete piece. And then on top of that, he does. So that's a different character. One person is going, and the other person is going, other two people. Okay, and then on top of that, he adds this. So, yeah. Etc. I'm eventually going to play the entire prelude. And then he could even do this. So you see that left hand has been playing a supportive role here, although it's a complete person. But that top person is like in a conversation, like all these voices are interacting. So you have music that is essentially, one can say that with Bach's music, you're listening to a conversation, a dialogue that's happening. And that's why I think a lot of people find refuge in their hearts and souls, and why when they talk about if only the human life could be more reflective of what is expressed in Bach's music, because you have not only oneself, but you have a whole society, you have a whole group of people that are genuinely interacting with each other and moving through the structure of the music, surrounded by the harmony to its logical structural construction. And if you listen to any piece by Bach, you'll have that. But you have to listen you can't be casual. You have to really listen because of all of the distinctions that are made. Now, in this prelude, it gets to... And there's going to be a switch. And what part do you think he's going to highlight now? That bottom voice. see that was playing that supportive role. All of a sudden, from the bottom, it goes and it becomes the main feature, and the two voices are dialoguing like that. So I'll play the entire prelude from beginning to end. Now, with that being a combination of people, you can then go to completely different circumstances. You know, that where now it's just three people and they're taking a walk in the Sapporo Spring. So you have, again though, you see that this person, oh, and then another person who does this. But then we have somebody in the middle, and that this. They're kind of, you know, they're having a conversation, but then there's this third person that's doing this. like chimes in once in a while. Now I'll play the entire prelude. See, that's, if only we could always be, instead of fighting wars, taking walks like that. Now, one last thing about Bach, that all of you will, in your life, have certain kinds of social interactions, where, like, let's say a fundraiser, okay, where you're going to be attending something, and there are going to be hundreds of people, and the purpose of this event is that much money for a cause is going to be raised. At those events, deep personal conversations don't tend to happen, and can, but don't usually happen, and that people are playing a function. There's a form of which Bach was the supreme master, and it's called fugue. I find it interesting because it's more like a dinner party, where if you're hosting a dinner party, doorbell rings. Somebody comes, you don't, okay, that's the person that's going to sit, to the left of somebody else. No, so somebody a friend, you greet them, and then you're inside, and then the next guest comes, and it's a unique recognition of the next person as well. So in fugue, there's a rule to the form where there's a theme, and when somebody comes in, they sing the same theme. So you have this. This is the theme. Okay? Now that's voice one. Next person's going to come in. Third person. And then they're off. Now we're going to switch gears to a different guy. Grew up in a family in Bonn, Germany, and his father drank too much, and he was a frustrated guy. And so when he realized that he had a very gifted son, he would do things like yank him out of bed, when he came back from his drinking, and make him sit down to practice, etc., etc. Well, Beethoven, fortunately, was a very strong character and a musical genius. And so he survived it. But the second he could, he got out of there and he went to Vienna, which was then the music capital of Europe, to start his adult life. Well, he was there for a few years, and then this terrible thing began to happen. He realized he's losing his hearing. And there he is, a musician that, like, the way he would make money to pay the rent was he was a very good pianist. So he could do a lot of gigs playing piano, and that's how he was first known in Vienna. But in order to do the arrangements to set up the gig, he had to be able to talk with people, etc. Has anybody had a grandfather or grandmother or a parent or anybody whose hearing got worse? Yeah. You know that even in family circumstances, that it's natural. There's a kind of a checking out that happens, and there are long spells where you realize that because they can't hear, they're not participating in the conversation. Well, Beethoven was terrified because he didn't get the formal good education like you guys are. And he certainly didn't have any social education. So he thought, I'm going to end up on the street. And this went on for years until finally he actually left in 2002 Vienna and went to a place called Heiligenstadt, which was then the countryside.
Yeah. How did you leave in 2002?
Oh, no, sorry, 1802. That's a good point. 1802. Might as well be 2002. Except that Heiligenstadt by 2002 was the last subway stop in Vienna. And in 1802, it was really the countryside. And he left with the intention of committing suicide. But he wrote a long letter because not his external circumstances. This is where Beethoven is a great model, but that he listened to himself internally. And he realized whatever was happening externally, there was this great life going on internally. And I really believe that every human being has a complete and rich inner life. We don't always listen to it. We don't always interact with it. But he writes, that kept him alive. And in fact, in his case, of course, a lot of it came in the form of music. And it's very funny because from that time on, he was a very unpretentious guy. And certainly about his music, he was completely humble. But when he would encounter someone that we would now call depressed, he would say, "Oh, you should listen to my music, it'll help you." And he said by somebody, where it was keeping him alive and keeping him going. So as far as he was concerned, that was. So anyway, but by 1803, end of 1803, he had come to terms and went back to Vienna. And what this thing that he was trying desperately for years to hide, and he would towards before he left Heiligenstadt, it was a panic creator, and so he would see somebody he knew that would want to have conversation with him, and he would turn around and go way out of the way because he didn't want to be caught. By the time he got back from Heiligenstadt, okay, I'm going back. And he was very, very open about it. Now, there's a great saying for anybody who's going to write anything, anybody that's going to express anything. And it happens to be by the American writer Mark Twain. Write what you know. Okay? Now, I'm going to play two pieces, one shorter and then a big piece to end. And the reason why I'm picking these pieces is because the first piece was composed in 1797, right before the onslaught of his impending death. And the second piece was composed in 1804, right after he came back from Helenic. And so that you can hear that here's a guy that really, just by probably no other composer, lived that edict. Write what you know. That you can feel the inner experience of Beethoven in all of his music. And you can tell that in the first piece, it's brilliantly composed, and okay, it's also maybe younger, but there's a kind, he hasn't had that tragedy of his, and then he comes back and he's got to live, okay? So I'll show you the first piece first. This is 1797. name is Sean. He comes back. And it's only 6 years later. This is what I'm talking about by right what you know. This drastic development. This is called human genius. That he was desperate to communicate something. And he takes this universal realm of music and creates a completely different way of composing and forming a piece in order to now, he's come back, he's not going to commit suicide, but he's also got to live, right? Now, how many of you have had this experience where you actually know something, believe something, but you can't, on such and such a day, quite get yourself to being and behaving like you really know you should be because you actually, believe that. You know, where you're like teetering in your, something's distracting you, and you know you should be focused in a certain way, but you somehow can't get there. None of you? Really? Yeah, I think all of them. Right. So, certainly I have. Practices like yoga are originated in their origin, not getting that concentration. So the first movement, that there's this instability that in the harmony, okay, but so he goes from things like this. He's going to keep moving, and the piece never really achieves a stability. And then we're going to go to the second movement, which is finally, he's worked himself, he's saying, I admit it. Sometimes I find things so overwhelming, I can't even get myself to get there. And then finally he gets there in the second movement. But now, what? And then the last movement, you'll hear this chord first very quietly, and then he goes, right? Yeah, okay, that's it. And then it's off to the races to the end. And it's this now he's going, okay? So first movement with the instability and the struggling, the second movement, it starts the hymn-like theme and then goes through some variations, arrives at that what we call a diminished chord, and then we're off to the last movement. Okay, put on your seatbelts and we'll get through this. questions? Yeah. Yes.
I love that cake over there. That was super long.
Oh my God. No, it's very hard to do.
I like cake over there. Like,
Well, you know, you get to a certain level of musicianship, and you can learn the notes very fast. You know, but it's not. You know. Okay, it's like getting a map of Sapporo. You can learn the map pretty fast, like in a week at the most. Right. But that doesn't mean you know the city. That's what it is. Right. You know, how long does it take to learn a map?
Yeah.
No time at all.
it's like it's a lot of music experience.
Yeah. And then there's some people who have photographic memory. They can look at a map and 5 minutes they have a memory. You know, it depends on the person. But that doesn't mean they know the city either. That's the point. Any other questions? It's been great. Yeah.
What is the tonic symptom that is?
F. F.
F minor.
F minor. Yeah, F minor major. He was asking a question about the mode, and it's a good question because in major to minor, like the piece that I was referencing earlier, this is major. What a birthday feels like if you get my age. And hopefully not too soon. Anyway, any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to thank you for, it's such powerful ideas, incredible music. I know it's going to stick with me all weekend. I'm sure the same for others. So thank you again. The question, it's kind of a big one, but just at the beginning, you started inviting us to think about kind of conflict and what's going on in the world. And then you shared this music with us. How do you think about the role that music and the arts have to play in improving the world and solving the kinds of problems you were talking about?
Yeah, that from there's no practical except that I believe that, it's like what we're learning about laws. Right now in the United States, there's all this huge, right? And the Supreme Court is doing this and that and the other thing. And at the end of the day, yes, we have to have laws. But it's beyond the laws. It's like economic systems. It's the people. It's the nurture. That's why it's hard work. I'm not going to, BS you about that. It's hard work. But it's the value of it. And it's that nurturing of values and discipline, all that stuff on that chart there, which is what it's about. At the height of the Cold War, when two nuclear powers had their missiles pointed at each other, right around the time that HIS started, John Kenneth Galbraith, the great economist, was asked, what's the difference between communism and capitalism? And he paused for a second and he said, well, in communism, man exploits man. And in capitalism, it's the other way around. It's the person, it's the humanity. Yeah. Even in laws, it's amazing. Right. So, and Plato's Republic, right? That a benevolent king is actually, a wise, benevolent king is actually the best form of government. But how often do you get that? Very rarely, right? So, or queen, whatever, yeah. Any other questions? Okay. Yes?
Do you have any other favorite composers besides Colin and Bob?
Oh, there are many, many great. Seriously, guys, that between literature, art, I live, half an hour walk from the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. And I've spent quite a bit of time there. But you can live there for years and years and years and years and still get not even, just you're still getting a slight percentage. And then you have great books, like, the first time you finish reading War and Peace, Tolstoy. It's an incredible experience. While I was reading it, I had a different sort of, felt like a different, it provides you with such a huge expanse on a daily basis as you're reading it. But then obviously, I read it 40 years ago. I've got to reread it, and that's just one book. That when you get discouraged by the news or what humans do on a social political level, that it's also just incredible the resources that humanity has left of the real thing. That's what getting educated is really about, that you get access and you have the tools to be able to tap in to this incredible realm that is our fellow human beings. And it's timeless. I'm sure we could go back 4,000 years and there was still some incredible human expression. So, yes?
I'm speaking as a father, and where do you start when you have a son that you want to get involved in music possibly, but you don't want to push him too hard, but you want to make sure that you expose him to it, and how do you get him started?
Yeah, I would say that just have it, do it on a regular, like I'm the only musician in my family, but I have two incredibly musical brothers and a musical sister, and my parents were. And little things like we used to sing songs together all the time, and harmonize and all that. And when we were little, I had a uncle who's a wonderful guy and a great chemist, but man, that guy was stoned. Yeah. And we go to Thanksgiving, and my dad would say, well, why don't we start the evening with a hymn? And I would look at my dad like, no, don't do that. And then my mom would give the pitch, and I'd have to look away and start like pinching myself, causing pain, because my mother gave a pitch, and she would do this, and he would come in something like this, and I knew this was going to happen. We all knew. God forbid I look at my brother, because he would have just burst out. But it's just doing it all the time like that. Yeah, and all the forms of it, right? That dance and and little things like most of the time, like physically we're like this, and then if you realize, wow, I'm internalizing this really kind of dead, heavy state, and I move, and woo, you realize, it's right there, except we're not tapping into it. Yeah.
Okay, well let's give